Hello, I'm John Walker. I'm taking a look at what happened in Parliament this week from a West Midlands point of view. On Monday we had education questions, and Gisela Stewart, the Birmingham MP for Edgbaston, was asking School Secretary Michael Gove about free schools and school academies. She wanted to know where these schools were going to get help and support, given that they no longer could rely on local authorities. In the olden days, back when we had what Labour used to call a bog standard comprehensive school, they were all part of the local authority family, and they knew who to go to for help. But that's not the case nowadays.
Heads used to turn to the LEAs for support to deal with underperforming teachers. Under his new regimes, who would he expect academies and free schools to turn to?
One of the things, as the Honourable Lady well knows, is that the Birmingham local authority does not have a particularly good record, whether it's under Labour or under a coalition administration, in providing an appropriate level of challenge. And if one looks at Birmingham itself, it's head teachers who are providing the opportunity, people like Christopher Stone, who are doing a fantastic job in making sure that other schools improve. Also, I would say, the best school in Birmingham, Perry Beeches, is a school which has now opened a free school, which is showing the way. If we empower teachers in the spirit in which the Honourable Member for Huddersfield was talking, then we can do a lot more to raise standards than we ever did when we empowered bureaucrats.
Education Secretary Michael Gove, as you heard, praised two schools in Birmingham, one of them Perry Beeches Academy, which he described as the best school in the city. It's received a glowing Ofsted report, quite a remarkable report. So he may be right in what he said, certainly as far as Ofsted is concerned. And he also talked about the head teacher of Arthur Terry School, which is another school which has been praised by inspectors. Now, he was making a political point there. He was saying that there's no need, or far less need at least, for local authorities, because head teachers, inspirational, successful head teachers, could take the lead instead and could potentially support other schools. Not a view that I think Labour and Gisela Stewart, a Labour MP, would necessarily share. Also on Monday, there is a debate in Westminster Hall, which is the second debating chamber in the House of Commons. It's as much part of the Commons as the famous chamber with the green benches, but it's not as well known. Westminster Hall, there was a debate about immigration from Bulgaria and Romania. Those two countries have joined the European Union, and restrictions on immigration from those countries are due to be lifted on December 31st. Now, Mark Pritchard, the Conservative MP for the Wrekin in Shropshire, was making the case for extending those restrictions. He was arguing that we shouldn't have a free-for-all, free entry from Romania and Bulgaria, as of course we do have from other EU members. There's almost complete relaxation on immigration controls from other parts of the EU, but he was saying, let's keep the restrictions from Romania and Bulgaria in place for a little bit longer.
But our focus today is on Bulgaria and Romania. And a BBC poll at midnight today issued suggests that no more than 4% of Bulgarians and 1% of Romanians might consider coming to the UK in 2014. Now, given that 150,000 Bulgarians and Romanians are already here under the permitted work scheme and other routes, I suspect the Newsnight poll is somewhat timid in its estimate. But even if those percentages are accurate, it would mean 350,000 people from each working age population from each of the countries arriving here in the UK. And the impact of EU migration affects schools as well. And I'm sure colleagues will know examples of how demand for school places has meant that some parents cannot send their children to the school of their choice because of the influx of EU migrants. And some families have had to place siblings in different schools as a result.
On Wednesday we had Foreign Office questions, and one issue that came up was Israel and Palestine. Richard Burden, the Labour MP for Northfield, who is a strong supporter of the Palestinian cause, the Palestinian people, if you like, asked a question which was fairly critical of Israel, I think. And later on, Ian Austin, who is the Labour MP for Dudley North, who's a supporter of Israel, and also, I'm sure he would say, a supporter of the Palestinians too, but who's bit more sympathetic, I think, to Israel than Richard Burden, asked a question where he criticised attempts to boycott Israel or to divest or to take money out of Israeli companies.
Richard Burden. The Foreign Secretary will be aware that the EU has a trade agreement with Israel and that allows goods to be imported under preference, and that he and 16 other EU foreign ministers have written to Baroness Ashton to ensure that guidelines are produced to ensure that goods produced in illegal settlements are not imported to the EU, label made in Israel. Will he say what is going on to implement those guidelines and to get them into force?
Well, those are guidelines we've already, under the previous government, indeed, advanced in the UK and that this government supports. I have indeed, with other EU foreign ministers, taken this up exactly as he describes, with the EU High Representative. And so we look to the whole of the European Union to do this in a coordinated and effective way.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Will the Secretary of State take this opportunity to set out the UK's opposition to boycotts, disinvestment campaigns and other attempts to delegitimise the State of Israel? Because the only way we're going to see peace in the Middle East, a secure Israel living peacefully alongside a viable Palestinian state, is by initiatives which bring people on both sides who believe in peace working together, and not by boycotts and all the rest of it, which just drive people further apart.
The honourable gentleman puts it very well, and I know he cares passionately about this subject. The United Kingdom has always opposed boycotts and disinvestment. We do believe absolutely that the future for peace in the Middle East will come through negotiations between the two different sides. And President Obama's recent speech, where he spoke about the urgency and the possibility of peace, but also the justice, the need for justice in the situation as well, provides a good base for both sides to proceed. And we believe and hope that those opportunities should be taken as quickly as possible.
Wednesday, of course, is Prime Minister's Questions, and Ed Miliband, the Labour leader, led on the state of the NHS. He highlighted figures showing that the number of people forced to wait more than 4 hours for admission to A&E departments had increased. 4 hours is the target the hospitals are supposed to meet. Now, what was interesting about this, I thought, was that David Cameron, in his response, highlighted on 2 occasions Stafford Hospital. Stafford Hospital, as you'll know, is a place where there were some severe problems. There's a suggestion that the death rate was higher than it would be expected to be, and possibly that would mean that people died who did not need to die if the treatment had been better, although that's perhaps disputed by some people. It certainly is the case that some of the treatment there was below standard, and that people were very badly treated, as a independent inquiry has confirmed. Now, this happened while Labour was in office. The Conservatives in the past have not tried to make political points out of this, but as you'll see, David Cameron on this occasion did decide to try to lay the blame for Stafford Hospital at Labour's door.
In the NHS. And part of the problem is that his replacement for the NHS Direct Service is in total chaos. He's now got a patchwork, fragmented service where over Easter 40% of calls were abandoned because they weren't answered. What's he going to do about it?
Well, if anyone wants to remember of Labour's record in the NHS, they've only got to read the report into the Stafford Hospital. He mentions the number of people waiting a long time for NHS operations. That number has come down since this government came to office. The fact is, which he cannot ignore, is since this government came to office, there are 1 million more people walking into A&E. There are 500,000 more people having inpatient treatments. And the fact is that waiting times are stable or down. Waiting lists are down. The NHS is performing better under this government than it ever did under Labour.
Up and down the country will have heard this is a Prime Minister with no answer for the crisis in our NHS and A&E services across the country. There is a crisis in A&E, and it's no surprise. He's cut the number of nurses, his NHS helpline is in crisis, and he's wasting billions of pounds on a top-down reorganisation that he promised wouldn't happen. The facts speak for themselves. The NHS is not safe in his hands.
Well, let us examine the NHS in Labour's hands in Wales. Here are the figures. The NHS budget, is it being increased? No, it's being cut by 8% by Labour. Last time the urgent cancer care treatment was met in Wales, anyone? 2008. Last time A&E targets were met, 2009. The Welsh Ambulance Service has missed its call-out target for the last 10 months. And of course, there is no cancer drugs fund. That is what you get under Labour. Cuts to our NHS, longer waiting lists, and all the problems we saw at the Stafford Hospital will be repeated over again.
Later on Wednesday, there was a debate about the proposed abolition of the Agricultural Wages Board, and Labour MP Jack Dromey, the MP for Birmingham Erdington, took part. He had quite a novel approach to delivering his speech. He started by reading out the words of a hymn which he felt was appropriate, but he did have a serious point to make at the end, as you'll hear.
And what I wanted to start by doing is to celebrate England's green and pleasant land. Our hills, our valleys, our forests, our farms, our rivers and our seashores. Captured in that great hymn to the countryside, Linden Lea, as follows. Within the woodlands, flowery gladed, neath the oak trees' mossy moot, shining grass blades, timber shaded, now do quiver underfoot. Brown leaf fruits are turning red, cloudless sunshine overhead, to where for me the apple tree do lean down low in Linden Lea. But the next verse of that great hymn to the English countryside went on to talk of, I don't dread a peevish master, though no man may heed my frowns. Because what that great hymn did was to capture both the beauty of our countryside, but also a reality which is all too often the countryside has been scarred by unfair treatment of workers and rural poverty.